On the night of July 4th, 2005, Butler Avenue in Compton was still carrying holiday noise when men slipped out from the bushes with rifles. Witnesses later tied Christopher Rock B. Holt, a Lueders Park Piru member, to the AK-47 attack that killed Mario Gordon and Corey Cartwright. The cold part was that witnesses said the victims were not even gang members. By the time court records caught up, the damage had already moved through another Compton family. That was Lueders Park after Rambo. But before the name became feared, it started inside the Nunn house across from the park. Before Sylvia Nunn became a name whispered across Compton, the Nunn family had a regular house with serious rules. In the late 1950s, the family moved into East Compton, settling in a single-family home during a period when the city was still changing. Her father, William Willie Nunn, had been a professional boxer, so discipline inside that house was not treated like some optional thing. He taught his children how to fight, how to handle firearms, and how to stand their ground when pressure came close. To outsiders, that might sound extreme, yet in that neighborhood, Willie framed it as survival before the streets finished explaining themselves. Sylvia Marie Nunn was born on June 9, 1962, into a family that was not described as broke or desperate. Some family accounts even describe Sylvia as receiving a new car every year, which matters when people try to explain her story only through poverty. The Nunns lived near Lueders Park, close enough for the park to feel less like scenery, more like a daily presence. That location placed Sylvia around boys, older homies, street talk, block politics, plus a kind of loyalty that children learned before understanding its cost. She was not born with the name Rambo, and nobody in that house knew how far her name would travel later. The first major shift came in 1973, when Willie Nunn was arrested on drug possession charges and then sent to prison. Sylvia was only 11, so the man who had been teaching structure, protection, fighting, firearms, plus discipline was suddenly gone. Once Willie disappeared from the home, Lovey Nunn had to keep the family moving while Compton outside the door kept getting rougher. That kind of absence hits different in a house full of children, especially when the block already respects strength more than softness. From that point, Sylvia was growing up with lessons from her father still in her body, while the street started adding its own rules. Her brother Marcus Nunn, later known as China Dog, became one of the most important names around her early life. Marcus was older, street-connected, and remembered in the research as one of the founding figures tied to Lueders Park Piru. That meant Sylvia did not have to search far to see what gang life looked like from the inside. It was not just something happening across town, since it was connected to her brother, her park, her house, and her last name. When people later talk about Rambo like she came out of nowhere, they miss how close the fire already sat. Billy Jr. Nunn carried a different kind of weight inside the family story, since several accounts remember him as less involved in gang life. While Marcus stood close to the street, Jr. had been described as someone who wanted no part of that world. That difference matters, since Jr. later becomes the wound that turns Sylvia's legend into something colder. For now, though, he belonged to the same household, the same mother, the same missing father, and the same Compton pressure. His place in the family gives the story its deeper tension, since not every Nunn child moved through the streets the same way. Cynthia Nunn also came out of that same environment, yet her path later became one of the strongest links to what survived after the violence. She would eventually become connected to Sylvia Nunn Angels, the Compton nonprofit built around keeping young people away from the same traps. In later interviews, Cynthia explained how growing up near Lueders Park made gang life feel less like a choice, more like the neighborhood's language. She also described real Piru identity as something people had to prove through violence, which shows how heavy the pressure was. That detail gives Sylvia's childhood a sharper shape, since even the women around that block understood what respect could demand. By the time Sylvia was coming of age, Lueders Park was no longer just a place where kids gathered, played ball, or passed the time. The Lueders Park Hustlers had already been part of a bigger shift toward Piru identity, turning the area into a serious East Side name. Their territory sat between Bullis Road, Atlantic Avenue, Compton Boulevard, and Rosecrans Avenue, with Mob Piru, Hollywood Piru, Elm Street Piru, and Limehood Piru nearby. Crip sets pressed from other directions, while later Sureño groups contested pieces of the same ground. So when Sylvia looked outside, she was not seeing a neutral neighborhood. She was seeing a map already marked by colors, enemies, allies, and consequences. That is why the Nunn house matters before the shooting, before the nickname, before the stories about disguises, payback, and fear. It shows a girl raised with enough comfort to reject the easy poverty excuse, yet close enough to the street to absorb its code. Willie gave the children tools for defense. Lovey tried holding the family together. Marcus pulled the family name toward Piru history. Junior stayed important for another reason. And Cynthia later carried the pain into community work. Sylvia stood in the middle of all of that, watching how people survived when the block started choosing sides. By the time Compton finally called her into the war, the foundation had already been laid inside the house across from Lueders Park. To understand why China Dog getting shot changed Sylvia, you have to understand what Lueders Park had already become. The park started as a gathering spot for young black boys who played ball, hung around, sold drugs, planned robberies, and then built street identity from the same corners. Over the 1970s, that loose crew known as the Lueders Park Hustlers folded into the Piru Alliance, which later became part of the Bloods' identity. Once that happened, the park stopped being just a neighborhood hangout since every nearby block started carrying meaning. Sylvia grew up watching that shift from close range, while Marcus Nunn moved deeper into the same world, shaping the streets outside their house. The bigger problem was that Compton was not divided by city maps anymore, since the real borders were colors, parks, blocks, families, plus old payback. The Crips had grown strong in the early 1970s, so smaller groups started linking up for protection against being swallowed. The Piru Street Boys, LA Brims, Denver Lanes, Inglewood Family, Swans, plus other independent crews built an anti-Crip alliance that later carried the Blood name. Even with that alliance, the Blood side was still outnumbered, which gave the whole movement a harder underdog edge. In that kind of setup, young people did not just grow up in Compton, they grew up inside a scoreboard. By 1972, the Piru Street gang had already linked with the Lueders Park Hustlers, dropped the old blue connection, and then adopted red as the public symbol. That move made the north side of Compton heavy with Piru energy, while Kelly Park Crips, neighborhood Crips, plus South Side Crips held ground elsewhere. The beef was not some vague street tension, since the geography gave everybody a side before they even stepped outside. Lueders Park sat near other Piru spaces like Mob Piru, Hollywood Piru, Elm Street Piru, Lime Hood Piru, plus the streets that later became tied to wider Compton conflicts. So when Sylvia was still young, her neighborhood was already moving like a fortress with history behind it. That fortress had names attached to it, so Marcus China Dog Nunn was not just Sylvia's big brother moving around the neighborhood. He became tied to Lueders Park Piru during the early years, at a time when being recognized could make you respected, watched, or targeted. Cynthia Nunn later explained that claiming Piru was not like saying a random label, since people had to prove they really belonged. That mattered for Sylvia, since she was watching her brother operate in a world where respect had to be defended out loud. The streets were teaching her that family, reputation, and danger could all sit in one car at the same time. The pressure around that life kept building through clashes with nearby Crip sets, especially Kelly Park Compton Crips, who became one of Lueders Park's early enemies. The feud later reached public attention in December 1985, when 15-year-old Kelly Park associate Charles Beebe Stevens was killed in a drive-by at Kelly Park. 2 days after that, Don Turner, a 30-year-old former Lueders Park member, was shot dead inside Lueders Park territory. Police responded with a 43-officer task force, then prosecutors eventually went after Kenneth Brown for Turner's murder. Those killings came after Sylvia's first turning point, but they show the kind of war her teenage years were already walking into. Before those 1985 killings made the feud louder, Sylvia's own house had already felt the war in 1979. She was 16 when gunfire erupted near the family home, so instead of running away from the noise, she moved toward it. Marcus had been hit by Crips, according to the family story, and he survived after being taken for treatment. That moment did not just injure her brother, since it pushed the whole Nunn name deeper into the conflict. On the block, when a brother got hit like that, everybody understood the message even before anybody spoke. The story told around Sylvia is that she did not process China Dog's shooting like a scared little sister. She reportedly demanded guns from people around her, then went looking through Crip areas with friends that same night. Some retellings say they drove through enemy territory firing wildly, trying to answer the attack before the block had even cooled down. That part should be treated as the beginning of the Rambo legend, not as a fully documented body count. Still, the important detail is clear enough, since Sylvia saw the shooting as a call to step into Marcus's war herself. Once she crossed that line, Sylvia was no longer just a boxer's daughter living near Lueders Park. She became the girl who carried the same family pain as the men, while refusing to sit in the back seat like decoration. Within a short time, she jumped in or was accepted into Lueders Park Piru, depending on which account is being told. What made that unusual was not just her age, since female gang members were often treated as lookouts, girlfriends, couriers, or support. Sylvia entered the set carrying a gun, moving like one of the active homies and making people adjust to her presence. That adjustment was not soft, since women in that street economy could move through places men could not always enter easily. Police were less likely to search them, rivals were less likely to clock them early, and older members understood how useful that blind spot could be. Sylvia's value was not only that she was Marcus's sister, since she had the nerve, the weapons training, and the anger to make her own name. Her father had taught her how to fight. Marcus showed her what Piru life costs. Then China dog shooting gave her a reason to stop watching from the edge. By the time Compton started calling her Rambo, the streets had already seen the first version of what she could become. Sylvia's rise inside Lueders Park Piru did not start with some big speech or public announcement. It came through in small situations where the older homies saw she was not trying to play mascot. One early story says she took part in a gas station robbery with her brother's crew, after they allegedly pushed her through a smashed window to grab the register money. When the older members later acted like her cut was a joke, Sylvia pressed the issue like somebody who understood street work has street payment. That moment stayed inside the way people retold her beginning, since it showed she wanted respect, not a cute title beside the real soldiers. That robbery story matters even if some details live inside gang folklore, since it explains how Sylvia's image started changing. Around Lueders Park, a woman could ride along, hide weapons, carry messages, or stand beside somebody dangerous. Yet Sylvia wanted her name attached to action. She had already watched Marcus, China Dog Nunn, get shot by Crips when she was 16, so the emotional line had been crossed early. After that, every move she made around the set carried the same message to the block. She was not simply China Dog's little sister anymore, and the homies had to deal with her like someone active. The family house also became part of the pressure, with both Marcus and Sylvia tied to Lueders Park Piru. Street retellings described the home as an informal gang hub, which would have made it visible to Crip rivals and law enforcement. Police were reportedly coming around looking for Marcus, while Lovey Nunn clashed with officers trying to protect her children inside that house. During one of those tense moments, the nickname Rambo is said to have been born after an officer mocked Sylvia for confronting the police over her mother. Whether the exact wording happened that way or got polished over time, the name stuck so hard that it followed her into gangland years later. Once people started calling her Rambo, the name gave shape to what the streets already thought they were seeing. The original movie character carried war energy, heavy weapons, survival instincts, and no soft lane for anybody blocking him. Sylvia took that label inside a Compton world where nicknames were not just jokes, since they could become warning signs. If somebody earned a name through fear, retaliation, or nerve, that name traveled faster than paperwork. So by the time Rambo became the word attached to her, it gave people a simple way to describe a woman who moved differently. Then the mid-'80s came through South Central Los Angeles, Compton, Watts, and Inglewood, with crack money changing the whole temperature. Lueders Park Piru was not sitting outside that economy, since the gang's violence and income became tied to the drug trade. Sylvia later admitted on gangland that she was using with people around her, while the streets around her normalized drive-by shootings and quick violence. Handguns, dope spots, moving cars burned relationships, and fast revenge became part of the same daily rhythm. That world did not create only dealers, since it created runners, lookouts, shooters, addicts, informants, and enemies who knew each other's houses. Women became useful in that setup for reasons the men on the block understood quickly. Police were less likely to search women, rivals were less likely to expect them, and a woman could move drugs, guns, or information with less heat. Some women gathered intelligence through relationships with men from enemy sets, while others were exploited by their own side. Sylvia stood out inside that whole pattern, since the gangland frame presented her as more than a courier or lookout. She became the kind of female affiliate people discussed as a shooter, enforcer, and name with her own weight. That is where her disguised story starts carrying real power inside the legend. Several accounts say Sylvia learned how to dress like a male gang member, using baggy clothes, short hair, and even facial tricks to pass through rival space. One account says she drew a mustache with mascara, then moved like someone who understood how quickly recognition could get her killed. That detail matters more than the body count talk, since it shows why the stories around her felt believable to people who feared her. A woman already underestimated by police could become even harder to read when she crossed into enemy blocks dressed like one of the homies. The same trick also showed how Sylvia's reputation grew through strategy, not just anger. A loud shooter could get spotted early, but somebody who changed appearance could get close before anybody understood the play. In Crip territory, that meant a rival might not notice danger until the moment had already gone bad. Around Lueders Park, stories like that made Rambo sound less like a regular gang member, more like somebody who could slide through cracks others missed. Even when specific killings were not documented in court files, the fear attached to those stories made people treat her name like fact. That fear connected Sylvia to a bigger pattern around Los Angeles gang history, where reputations sometimes became as powerful as convictions. Sonika Shakur, known earlier as Monster Cody from the 8 Trey gangster Crips, became famous through his own violent reputation before writing his memoir. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson later became tied to national headlines through the Southside Compton Crips, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the Mob Piru world. Sylvia's path was different, yet the comparison shows how Compton and South Central could turn local street names into lasting mythology. In her case, the story traveled through family accounts, gangland narration, online retellings, and the fear people remembered. By the time the Rambo name settled around Sylvia Nunn, she had become one of the rare women in that world who was not remembered as background. Her father's firearm lessons, China dog shooting, the gas station story, the police confrontation, the crack years, and the disguised tales all stacked into one reputation. The record does not prove every killing later attached to her name, so the script has to keep that line clean. Still, what the record and retellings agree on is heavy enough. Sylvia grew up inside Lueders Park Piru, became feared in a male-dominated street world, and carried a name that outlived the block stories. That is why the next turn in her life hits harder, since Rambo's legend was already built before 1991 brought the brother she could not protect. By April 1991, Sylvia Rambo Nunn had already become a hard name around Lueders Park Piru. Police knew her reputation, the block knew her history, and rivals understood she was not some background figure. That month, officers reportedly came with a warrant, then placed a choice in front of her. She could cooperate against Lueders Park Piru's drug operation, or she could sit down in jail. Sylvia chose cooperation, and on a Compton street, that choice carried a label heavier than prison time. That label was snitch, and in her world, it could follow a person faster than any police file. The same woman feared by Crips now had Bloods looking at her sideways, wondering what name she gave up. For a set built on loyalty, silence, and retaliation, cooperation was never treated like a small move. It did not erase her old work, but it cracked the trust around her name. Once that crack opened, every enemy, homie, and family member had to live with whatever came next. The timing made everything feel even colder, since Compton had already trained people to expect payback from every side. Lueders Park Piru had long-standing friction with Kelly Park Compton Crips, neighborhood Crips, Southside Compton Crips, plus nearby sets fighting over territory. Back in December 1985, 15-year-old Charles Beebe Stevens had been killed in Kelly Park, and then Don Turner was shot dead 2 days later in Lueders Park. Police brought a 43-officer task force after those killings, yet the street still handled pain in its own way. By 1991, Sylvia had grown inside that same rhythm, where court cases rarely settled what bullets started. Then, on July 23, 1991, the choice from April took on a whole different meaning. Billy Jr. Nunn, the brother often remembered as less involved in gang life, was walking his girlfriend home. He was not Marcus China Dog Nunn, the brother tied deeply to Lueders Park Piru's history. Jr. was the one several retellings describe as wanting no real part in that street world. That separation made his death cut deeper, since the person hit was not the one carrying the loudest gang reputation. The call came through Sylvia's mother, Lovey Nunn, with news that changed everything again. Jr. was tragically killed by a gunshot while walking with his girlfriend. Reports described the attack as coming from behind. Nobody gave Sylvia a clean answer that could calm her down, and no solved case came forward to carry the weight. Rumors pointed toward Kelly Park Crips, local drug figures, or people tied to older tensions around Compton. What mattered to Sylvia was that her brother was dead, and the system she had just cooperated with had not protected him. That is where the public record gets thin, while the street story gets loud. The version repeated through gang history circles says Sylvia went back into the field after Junior's murder. In that telling, she did not move like somebody waiting for detectives or paperwork. She dressed like a man, pulled from what her father Willie Nunn had taught her about weapons, then started looking for names. The people who tell the story say she was not hunting random strangers, but men she believed were connected to Junior's killing. The disguise detail is important, since it links back to the way Rambo had already learned to survive around male gang spaces. Accounts say she wore men's clothing, moved through Crip territory, hid her Piru rag, and used appearance like a weapon. Some versions describe her dressed head to toe in black, slipping through enemy areas before anybody could clock her. That was the part that made the legend travel, since it gave people an image they could not shake. A woman already underestimated by police could become almost invisible when rivals expected danger to look male. From there, the stories get heavier, and that is where the line between record and folklore has to stay clean. The street version says Sylvia moved house to house, gathered information, and punished people believed to be hiding Crips. Some retellings claim she stormed apartments, questioned neighbors at gunpoint, and beat women accused of sheltering enemies. One story even claims she disguised herself as a nurse to reach an injured rival inside a hospital. None of those scenes come with named victims, court numbers, or solid case files, yet they kept circulating around her name. That missing paperwork does not make the legend useless, since street reputation often grows from fear before documentation catches up. Compton homicide detectives were swamped during those years, while witnesses often refused to cooperate after gang shootings. Victims connected to gang life did not always receive the same urgency from police, and neighborhoods often stayed silent to avoid retaliation. That silence created space where rumor, truth, exaggeration, and survival memory all mixed together. So when people said Rambo was moving through rival blocks one by one, the story found room to breathe. The one-by-one campaign became the part that turned Sylvia into something bigger than a regular Lueders Park Piru member. People claim she tracked names connected to Junior's death, then caught targets through patience rather than loud displays. The idea was not just that she shot back, since many people in Compton shot back during that era. The fear came from the thought that she could change her look, enter your space, get close, then disappear. Whether every detail happened exactly that way, the psychological effect on the street was real. That effect reached across the same landscape where other Compton names were already being shaped by violence. Marcus China Dog Nunn had survived being shot by Crips in 1979, which first pushed Sylvia toward the war. Junior's murder in 1991 turned the same family wound into a second trigger, colder than the first one. Cynthia Nunn later survived long enough to speak about what Piru life demanded from young people around Lueders Park. Those three siblings show the whole arc around Sylvia. The brother who drew her toward the set, the brother whose death fed the legend, and the sister who later tried to pull youth away. Outside the Nunn family, the same Compton code kept showing up in other stories tied to Lueders Park. The feud with Kelly Park Compton Crips had already produced bodies, raids, and old grudges by the time Junior died. Later cases like Christopher Rock B. Holt's 2005 Butler Avenue shooting showed that Lueders Park violence kept spilling into new generations. Mario Gordon and Corey Cartwright were killed in that 4th of July attack, even though witnesses said they were not gang members. That later scene shows why Sylvia's story cannot be separated from the larger machine she came out of. Still, 1991 was personal in a way those wider conflicts were not. Sylvia had already chosen cooperation in April, then buried her brother, who was supposed to be outside the deepest gang business, in July. That sequence gave the legend its emotional engine, since it made her revenge sound less like gang politics, more like family payback. On the block, that difference mattered, even to people who judged her for talking to the police. Some could call her a snitch, yet still fear the sister who believed her harmless brother had been taken. The aftermath also started eating at her life beyond the street name. Research accounts say her children were often left with relatives while she moved through chaos, drugs, grief, and retaliation stories. Cocaine and alcohol became part of the damage, while friends and family backed away from the heat around her. Enemies multiplied, trust kept shrinking, and every new rumor made Rambo harder to separate from Sylvia Nunn. The woman behind the name was still a mother, sister, daughter, and addict living under the weight of deaths that never really closed. That is why this part of her story has to be told without pretending every claim is proven. The confirmed facts are strong enough. Sylvia cooperated in 1991, Jr. was killed on July the 23rd, and her reputation exploded after that. The alleged details around house-to-house revenge, hospital disguises, apartment raids, and hidden identities remain mostly street folklore. Yet folklore can still move like evidence inside neighborhoods where fear is its own record. By the early 1990s, Rambo had become the type of name people lowered their voices around. At that peak, the mystery around her became part of the threat itself. If she looked like a woman, people feared her anger, and if she dressed like a man, they feared missing the warning. If she came through Lueders Park, people knew her set, yet if she crossed into enemy space, they wondered who had helped her. That uncertainty made her reputation travel far beyond any single documented case. By the time Sylvia finally started looking for a way out, Rambo had already become a story Compton could not easily put back in the box. By the time Sylvia Nunn left Compton in 1993, the streets around Lueders Park had already grown past old neighborhood beefs. The same Piru world that shaped her was moving into music, money, security crews, record labels, celebrity entourages, plus national headlines. Mob Piru became one of the loudest names in that shift, mostly through Marion, Suge, Knight, and Death Row Records. Knight had Mob Piru ties, co-founded Death Row, then placed Bloods from his neighborhood around the label as security. That move made the line between studio business and Compton politics feel as thin as paper. Lueders Park Piru was not Death Row, and Sylvia was not the reason Tupac Shakur got shot in Las Vegas. Still, her set existed inside the same Piru ecosystem that reacted when Mob Southside Compton Crips clashed. That connection matters since Lueders Park and Mob Piru had been allies within the wider Blood Alliance before later splits changed relationships. In the 1990s, Death Row gave that world money, access, travel, status, and a bigger stage for old street tensions. So while Sylvia was trying to leave the life, the world that built Rambo was getting louder outside Compton. One name that pulled the whole mess toward Las Vegas was Trevon Trey Lane, a Mob Piru member who worked security for Death Row. The story goes that Southside Crip snatched his Death Row medallion at a Foot Locker, turning a street insult into a label problem. On September 7th, 1996, Lane spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson inside the MGM Grand in Las Vegas after the Mike Tyson fight. Tupac, Suge Knight, and their people then beat Anderson in the lobby, with surveillance later making that moment part of hip-hop history. 3 hours after that beating, Tupac was shot while riding in the car with Knight. That shooting did not stay in Nevada since the smoke rolled straight back into Compton. Tupac died 6 days later, while rumors around Orlando Anderson turned Southside Compton Crips into the focus of heavy retaliation talk. Over the following days, the research records 12 shooting incidents and 3 fatalities in Compton during the Mob Piru and Southside Crips fallout. Lueders Park Piru sided with Mob Piru during that escalation, which means the set Sylvia came from was still connected to the response. One Lueders Park member, George Mack, was reportedly shot and wounded days later, showing how fast celebrity violence reached regular blocks. Orlando Anderson's own path shows how one Compton name could travel from local beef into worldwide speculation. He was born on August 13, 1974, joined the Southside Compton Crips at 16, and then became tied to Tupac rumors after the MGM fight. Anderson denied involvement in Tupac's murder, and he was never charged before his own death in 1998. Detectives later said he was killed during a Compton car wash shootout linked to drug money, not Tupac's case. That ending still fits the pattern around Sylvia's world, where national attention faded while the block kept paying in blood. Death Row also pulled in Wardell Poochie Faust, a Mob Piru figure whose name carried a darker kind of street weight. Faust was born in Kentucky in 1960, moved to Compton, joined Mob Piru, and built a violent reputation early. Court records and the research say he fired a shotgun at a woman's house at 14, then later became wanted in a 1991 home invasion where a man died. Reggie Wright Jr. arrested him in 1994 with cocaine and an assault weapon, yet Faust still worked around Death Row as a bodyguard. Greg Cadding later alleged that Foose killed William Ratcliffe in 1995, then Christopher Notorious B.I.G. Wallace in 1997. That Biggie claim is one of those areas where the script has to stay careful, just like Sylvia's alleged body count. Cadding's investigation pointed toward Foose as the shooter, with Teresa Swan allegedly receiving money from Knight to arrange the hit. Sylvia had no credible connection to Biggie's murder, and the research specifically rejects the online rumor trying to link her to that case. The reason Faust belongs here is not to blame Sylvia for the death row business. His story shows how the same Compton Piru network produced feared enforcers who moved between street missions and celebrity circles. Then came Alton Buntry McDonald, another mob Piru name tied to death row's inner circle. McDonald was born in 1966, worked as a death row production manager, and stayed close to Suge Knight. He had also participated in the beating of Orlando Anderson after the Mike Tyson fight, placing him near the same spark that preceded Tupac's shooting. On April 3, 2002, McDonald was filling his car at a Compton gas station when George Williams approached him. Williams shot him multiple times, turning a public gas pump into another marker in the mob Piru and Fruittown Piru feud. That murder pushed Compton blood politics into a more poisonous lane, where old allies started turning inward. Fruittown Piru and mob Piru were no longer just part of one red umbrella, since death row money and internal betrayals had opened new wounds. After McDonald was killed, Eric Scar Daniel, suspected in the shooting, was killed in June 2002. Gary G. Phillips was later shot and wounded, while Taryn Baby Jesus Andrews and Gregory Fleetwood Shelton were charged with attempted murder. Investigators tied that shooting to retaliation for Buntry McDonald, making the Civil War feel organized, personal, and hard to stop. Wardell Faust did not make it out of that climate either, which shows how the circle kept closing around everybody involved. He was shot dead in Compton on July 24, 2003, with Cadding believing the killing came from mob Piru and Fruittown Piru infighting. That date matters since it came years after Sylvia had already left the city and tried building a new identity. Still, the world that gave her the Rambo name was proving it could reload without her. The players changed, the money got bigger, the music became famous, yet the punishment system stayed familiar. Then the story returns to the scene that opened this video, long after Sylvia's own street years were over. On July 4th, 2005, Christopher Rock B. Holt drove a red Monte Carlo through Butler Avenue in Compton. Witness Antoine Washington recognized the car, and he knew Holt as a Lueders Park Piru member. Later that evening, 3 men came out from the bushes with rifles while a group of friends was celebrating the holiday. Washington and another witness said Rock B held an AK-47, firing around 15 shots into the crowd. Mario Gordon and Corey Cartwright were killed in that attack, while witness Keaton later identified Rock B as the main shooter. Keaton also told detectives the victims were not gang members, which made the whole scene even colder. This was not a clean enemy hit inside some private war, since civilians got swallowed by the same old street logic. Holt was eventually convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. By then, the Lueders Park name had traveled from Sylvia's teenage war to a courtroom built around another generation's blood. That is why Butler Avenue belonged at the beginning, even though Sylvia was not standing there in 2005. It showed what survived after Rambo left, after Death Row rose, after Tupac died, after Bunty fell, after Foos got killed. Lueders Park Piru had moved through family revenge, crack-era violence, music industry security, mob Piru alliances, Fruittown conflict, and documented murder cases. Sylvia Nunn's personal story sits inside that bigger machine, not outside it. So when people ask how one woman became feared enough to become a legend, the answer starts with her family but spreads across the whole Compton map. In 1993, Sylvia Nunn left Compton for Las Vegas, trying to put distance between Rambo and the streets that built her. That move did not erase Lueders Park Piru from her name, but it placed her in a city where she could breathe differently. Las Vegas had its own gang problems, with California street politics already drifting into Nevada, yet Sylvia kept herself away from the old lane. 2 years later, in 1995, she married John Hardman, a former sheriff's deputy from Kansas City, Missouri. That detail sits heavy in the story, since a feared Piru woman was now trying to build a life beside a former lawman. After the marriage, Sylvia became known as Sylvia Hardman, which sounded far from the Rambo name people still use back home. She became active around Second Missionary Baptist Church in Pahrump, a small Nevada town about an hour outside Las Vegas. The line people kept repeating from her later life was that she had put down Piru and picked up Jesus. That did not mean the past suddenly got washed clean, since her body, mind, family, and children still carried damage from Compton. Still, the move showed that Sylvia was trying to stop living like every call could be war news. That attempt at peace was never simple, since old habits do not leave quietly after years of gunfire, drugs, and revenge. Research accounts say Sylvia reconciled with her children, tried building a family environment, and spoke more openly about redemption. At the same time, years of cocaine, alcohol, stress, and violence followed her into Nevada like unpaid debt. Around 2010, she was reportedly diagnosed with kidney failure while also dealing with depression. So even away from Compton, the same life that made Rambo famous was still taking something from Sylvia Hardman. Then, in 2008, the History Channel's Gangland pushed her story beyond Compton circles through the episode From Girl to Gangster. The episode used Sylvia under the name Rambo while covering female gang membership, Lueders Park Piru, crack-era violence, disguises, cooperation with police, and her Christian turn. For many viewers outside California, that was the first time they heard about a woman tied to blood history this way. For the streets, it gave national shape to stories people had already passed around for years. That episode also made the mystery stronger, since it brought the legend to television without locking every killing into court-proven fact. On April 20th, 2010, Sylvia Hardman died at age 47 and was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in Las Vegas. Her death did not bring the same national attention that gangland had brought her name 2 years earlier. In Compton, though, people remembered her in different ways, with some seeing a warrior, others seeing a warning. The research says her funeral drew Bloods and Crips alike, with some coming to pay respect, while others wanted to know she was really gone. That kind of ending fits a woman whose name lived between fear, loyalty, violence, regret, and unfinished questions. After Sylvia died, Cynthia Nunn became the strongest voice moving the family name towards something else. She helped build Sylvia Nunn Angels in Compton, using the full mission name SYLVIANNANGELS for youth support against gang pressure. The organization gave out holiday gifts, backpacks, food, hygiene kits, job help, community service opportunities, Bible study, summer camps, and gospel concerts. Dr. Dre even donated a van to help transport kids, which gave the work practical muscle beyond speeches. Cynthia turned the same neighborhood that once shaped Rambo into the place where younger people could see another route. That is where Sylvia Nunn's story lands, not with a clean answer, but with a real divide. Sylvia was real, China Dog's shooting was real, Junior's death was real, and the fear around Rambo was real. Her move to Las Vegas, her marriage to John Hardman, her church life in Pahrump, and her death in 2010 are documented pieces. The most famous revenge killings attached to her remain trapped between memory, street talk, gangland storytelling, and missing records. So the truth is not that Rambo was only myth or only fact, but that Compton remembered her in the dangerous space between both.